Welcome everybody to Tales from the Jar Side. This week the title is No One Makes the First Jump, Java LTS versions, I'll define that, The Temptations of Curmudgeon Mode, I need to define that as well of course, a new Mockito video, and Tweets and Toots. The subtitle says, When I get to work I immediately hide because good employees are hard to find. Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't find a better one than that this week. So, at any rate, my name is Ken Cousin. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side, the video series. This is my chance to read the newsletter to you that went out yesterday and to give you a little bit of backstory and definitions and extra discussions associated with what's contained inside the text. So, let me dive right in. So, as we say, welcome, fellow jarheads, to Tales from the Jar Side, the Cousin IT newsletter for the week of February 4th through 12th, 2023. Yesterday was Super Bowl Sunday. Hope you enjoyed it. Today is not yet a national holiday, although that seems inevitable sooner or later. This week I taught my Managing Your Manager course, and I taught week 2 of my Android Development Bootcamp on the O'Reilly Learning Platform, as well as a new features in Java course as an NFJS, a no-fluff, just stuff virtual workshop. I will say that Android Studio behaved better this week. I figured out what problem I was having had to do with upgrading Java versions, but everything seemed to be okay this week. Regular readers of and listeners to, and of course viewers of, this newsletter are affectionately known as Jarheads, and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or listener or viewer. If you wish to become a Jarhead, please subscribe using the button provided in the newsletter. Okay, now, the first section is called If No One Ever Made the First Jump. And I imagine most anyone who's interested in this newsletter or my videos is familiar with this scene from The Matrix. Now, before I get into it, I have to mention The Matrix was the first DVD I ever owned. I mean, I went to see it in the theater, but I actually bought the DVD, and here's the best part. I bought the DVD before I owned a DVD player, just to give you an idea. So, at any rate, I was a big fan. So, in part of the movie, then after Neo has undergone some of his initial training, when he learns by being plugged into the system, although not really into the Matrix, and then just goes, zzz, in the back of his head, and suddenly he knows Kung Fu and all of that. Morpheus, shown here on the right, tells Tank, the operator, to load the jump program. And in the jump program, you can see vaguely here without me playing the video, Morpheus actually leaps from one building to the next after telling Neo you have to let it all go, any fear or doubt or anything. And basically the implication is Neo is supposed to follow him. So Mouse, with the other members of the crew who are watching this via the program, are saying things like, what if he makes it? And Tank says, no one's ever made the first jump. And Mouse says, I know, but what if he does? And Apoc says he won't. And sure enough, he doesn't. He plummets down to what would arguably be his death, but of course he falls into the pavement and bounces back up. And supposedly in the original script, they make a point about how many people make the second jump because they now know that the first one is not fatal. But regardless, nobody ever makes the first jump. The jump program is supposed to illustrate how far Neo still has to go to, quote, free his mind and let go of reality once he's inside the Matrix. As an instructor, however, I have a different interpretation. In my view, if everybody fails the first time, you're teaching it wrong. It's not the fault of the student, it's the fault of the instructor. Seriously, what's the point of an exercise that everybody fails? To show them they don't know everything? Well, they obviously are aware of that already. To publicly humiliate them? How does that help anybody learn anything? And yet, some instructors will do exactly that. There is value in showing a student how far you can go once you reach your potential. I have no problem with Morpheus demonstrating that once Neo has reached his potential, he'll be able to jump to the next building with no problem at all. But the implication is that Neo's supposed to do it right away, immediately, without a problem. He's supposed to be able to make the jump. And Morpheus knows, he absolutely knows that Neo's not going to make it. That, I mean, maybe there's one chance, and you could make this vague argument that, well, if he doesn't know he can't do it, maybe he will, but nobody's ever made the first jump. So the odds are pretty much stacked against him. And the worst part is, of course, is that after Neo fails, every time Morpheus gives him a task to do from that point on, he's going to have this nagging doubt in the back of his mind that Morpheus is setting him up to fail again. And Neo, in the script again and in the backstory, is already supposed to be pretty suspicious of authority. How is this a good thing? Now, as an instructor, I can't teach like that. That would drive me crazy. I just feel that that's putting all of the importance on the instructor. It's a power battle. It's exerting dominance, if you will, by the instructor. And that doesn't help learning at all. A lot of instructors forget that learning is hard. I mean, it's hard enough without making students worry that you're going to humiliate them in front of everybody else. Neo may not be aware that everybody's watching, but he probably knows. To me, the result of that test is just to make the instructor feel powerful, and I see no gain from that at all. In fact, I think that's awful. Now, why am I harping like this on a movie that is literally 24 years old, believe it or not? Can you believe that came out in 1999? It's been a long time. Well, this came up on one of the mailing lists that I participate on. So I'm not going to call out anyone by name. It's not my purpose to challenge anyone publicly. I'll get into why I didn't say anything at the time either, but let me tell you what this is about. Someone noted on the mailing list, the Java Champions list, that the upcoming Java 21 version, which is coming out in September, is now going to be an LTS version, a long-term support version. Now, Java has been releasing major versions of Java, since Java 10, I believe, every March and every September. So next month, Java 20 will come out, and in September, Java 21 will. Now, the Oracle acknowledged from the beginning, Oracle runs Java, basically, the specification. At any rate, lots of vendors provide their own implementation. But the idea is that a lot of companies are not interested in upgrading their production virtual machines every 6 months. And therefore, while developers in principle can use the latest version of Java anytime they want, Oracle decided to designate a long-term support version to occur every 3 years. So Java 8 was retroactively designated an LTS version, and Java 11 was the first one after that. Then, 3 years later, Java 17 came out. 6-month releases every 3 years. Of course, that came out with 6 versions, and we're up to 17. The unintended result, however, this isn't what the team at Oracle wanted, was that most companies simply ignored non-LTS versions, and if you can't use a latest version in production, why would the developers want to use the latest version in their own work? I mean, if you can't put your own work into production, why should you go for these other versions? So I've always felt this argument that the developers can always use the latest, just can't, acknowledging that the companies may not want to do that. I've always found that a little shaky, because why would you want to develop with something that you cannot then use in production? At any rate, so the most recent market share numbers I've seen, and I think we're due for another survey fairly soon, suggested that Java 17 has finally reached about 20% of the market. And we're talking about a year and a half ago for this, when it was first released. And Java 8 still has a low 40s in market share, and Java 11 has also low 40s in the market share. And all the non-LTS versions combined barely make it into measurable status. I mean, they're certainly in the single digits. Almost nobody's using them. So the team at Oracle doesn't like this. They're trying to get features into the marketplace more quickly. I can understand that. If I'm developing something, I want people to use it. So they decided at Oracle to move the LTS period up to 2 years. Now, I, like the questioner, the person who asked a question about this, I never saw anything formal about that. I never saw a vote or something from the mailing list. And I didn't hear any word from any of the other vendors who provide Java versions either about what their issue was. Now, in most languages, when the team running the language announces what's going on, that's the end of the story. But in Java, the way it's always been is that Sun and now Oracle provides a specification and a reference implementation, their own implementation of the spec. But there have always been multiple vendors who provide an implementation of Java. Oracle was only one. IBM had their own from the beginning. Now there's half a dozen or more that provide certified, they pass the test kit versions of Java. So the question that was asked was, well, did Oracle confirm this is going to be LTS is now moving to 2 years? And if so, is everybody else going to move that way too? Is this part of the spec now? So that was the question. And a couple of responders agreed that this was, in fact, exclusive to Oracle, this 2-year period. Each vendor has their own schedule for support, though everyone follows the official specifications for their implementation. And this is when one of the leaders in the field, again, who I'm not going to name, responded in the following way. And it's a big quote here. It says, "People seem to have a surprisingly hard time with this, but in actuality, it is quite simple. I guess some people just really, really want it to be different." And it is, and the emphasis is added myself. It is truly bizarre that this still has to be explained at this point, 5 years after adopting this model, especially to Java champions. Java specifications are not divided into LTS and non-LTS. Every Java release is a full feature release with all the usual artifacts, specification, implementation, TCK, that's the test kit. The Java 17 specifications do not say this version is an LTS, and the Open JDK process, that's the open source version of Java, under which the specifications and the implementations are developed, do not distinguish between kinds of releases. Java releases are releases. Each Java release, I think that's the implication, is a full-scale release. LTS is a support phenomenon. LTS is a statement by a particular entity, in this case being Oracle, that they will make particular support, such as updates, that's patches, security patches, bug fixes, available under a particular license for a particular time frame. Oracle's JDK offering, known as the Oracle JDK, were previously on a 3-year LTS cadence and have moved to a 2-year LTS cadence, with 21 thereby being the next LTS. Other organizations can decide to offer LTS on other JDK releases or offer support on other terms than the LTS terms offered by Oracle. Someone could decide they're going to offer 13-year support on Java 13. This is entirely up to them, and there is no, quote, coordination process between vendors to decide which versions will be determined LTS. And concludes with this statement: "It does great damage to the Java ecosystem for people to hear the non-LTS release being described by Java champions as betas or not real or not serious by Java champions. This was an acceptable misunderstanding for about 10 minutes 5 years ago, but we should be past that now." Now, I have to point out, the questioner didn't do any of those things. They did not refer to non-LTS releases as a beta or not real or not serious or anything like that. Although that issue has come up in the past, it is obviously something that bothers people at Oracle, especially this particular responder. Now, when I saw this response, I wanted to reply immediately. And my message would have been, had I done so, with this brief statement, that if everyone is still asking this same question, including Java champions, and you believe they should know better because it was all resolved 5 years ago, then you're teaching it wrong. It's not the students. If everybody's missing it, something's wrong with the communication. It's not getting across. And just complaining about this to people who are, in fact, your allies, the people that you want to be on your side, is counterproductive. Again, my problem with the original answer, this answer that is quoted there, is the attitude. It's the attitude expressed by the writer. The responder is implying that Java champions are misunderstanding what they believe to be a fundamental concept. Why? Because either they're not paying attention, or they're stupid, or they just don't care. Now, if we assume for the sake of argument that anyone who qualifies to be a Java champion isn't stupid, then what's the problem here? Why isn't the message getting across? That's the real question. What's keeping this message from making it through? Now, first of all, the title Java Champion can be misinterpreted. It's a bit misleading. It sounds like it implies excellence technically in Java. And that's not necessarily true. That's only one way that you can become elected to the Java Champions group. Other ways include doing meeting organizing and community events and community support, or advocating for the language in public forums, or publishing information that tries to expand the user base. There are many people who are Java champions for those reasons, and while they certainly understand Java to an extent, it's not their technical excellence that makes them stand out. But I mean, they care, and they work hard, and they try very hard to do as well as they can. But this really emphasizes that the Java Champions group is your target audience. Those are the advocates. Those are the people that you want and that are trying to help. They believe in the language, and they try to convince people to use it, and they work hard to help it get accepted in the marketplace, both among the developers as well as among companies. So if after 5 years some fundamental concept still isn't getting through, why is that happening? What's the actual problem? It can't be that just the students, or at minimum, it can't only be the fault of the students. At some point, the teacher, in this case Oracle, has to take some responsibility for the lack of this message getting through. And the quoted response doesn't imply that at all. Now, I didn't actually say any of that. I was tempted. One reason I didn't is, well, partly I'm a coward. I didn't want to trigger the confrontation that might occur. Also, the person who responded was a leader in our field, and I don't want to challenge someone like that publicly. I mean, there's nothing to be gained from that. I could have sent them something in private. I thought about it, but I didn't. And I have enormous respect for this person. I've said many times that when this person talks, I listen. I don't always understand, but I listen. But I was tempted to say something anyway, partly so that the people who did feel attacked in this knew that they had some support, that it isn't just their fault, it's not entirely their fault. But I also partly held back because I didn't want to deal with what could very likely wind up being a lot of drama, a lot of messages going back and forth and people getting upset and all of that. But in addition to that, I have my own personal opinion as to why the responder responded the way he did. And I understand that. Now, first of all, I said, I feel like this person, whom, as I have said, I greatly respect and admire, has over time become more and more of a curmudgeon. A curmudgeon is somebody I describe as saying it's a senior person who adopts the attitude of seen it all, done it all, not impressed. You know, they're a drag. They express that attitude in a way that drags down everyone around them. They're hard to deal with. They show no enthusiasm. They are contemptuous of questions. In fact, that's the problem. They're difficult and depressing people to deal with because they are all too willing to express their barely concealed contempt for questions, and by implication, questioners that they don't like. So let me keep this personal rather than, again, trying to attack anybody. Let me address my own struggle as I've gotten older to avoid becoming a curmudgeon. I call this the curmudgeon trap. So the curmudgeon trap is to keep from becoming a curmudgeon as your knowledge and experience grow. I understand why this person, or potentially why this person, behaves like that, the leader in the field. He's been an acknowledged technical expert in Java for literally decades. I mean, the language is 25, 26, 27 years old, and he was there practically from the beginning. And people who are that expert attract a lot of difficult questioners around them who enjoy asking difficult, bizarre, weird edge questions. Not only that, he's had to deal with a lot of hostile and obnoxious developers for many years, some of whom condemn Java for reasons that are simply wrong or at least misguided. Some people argue with him in bad faith. I mean, I would hate that role, and I've seen this happen to the guy. I would get very frustrated with that. I find that this leader acts like a curmudgeon too often, however, and his answer is just the latest example. My feeling is that a curmudgeonly attitude, as they say, like the one expressed there, is actually going to do more harm to the community than any misunderstanding of what an LTS version is or is not. This is a problem. These things flow from the top, and this is one of the people at the top. You don't want to express hostility to your own community, especially coming from the top. Now, it's possible I read too much into this. As I say, it's a sensitive topic for me. And I'm not willing, and I was not willing to respond this way on the Java Champions list. I also needed a couple days to mull this over. I didn't want to just respond emotionally right off the bat. I wanted to think about it because I don't want to be dismissive either. But here's my newsletter. I mean, and I'm assuming that while I do have a nice subscriber base, I think I can rely on the people to at least give me the benefit of the doubt and listen to what I have to say, at least why I'm doing this. If that leader winds up hearing about this and is offended, then they may contact me and I'll have to deal with it. Okay, so be it. I mean, I do stand by what I'm saying here, and I mean no hostility toward that individual, but I do have a concern and I'm expressing it. Most likely, however, there'll be no problems at all. As I used to say on the Groovy podcast, which we still have, just not very often, you can say whatever you want because nobody's listening anyway. So we'll see. I gotta say, saying all this out loud is a bit of a risk for me. But it is a sensitive issue because as I've gotten older, I worry that I slip into curmudgeon mode, as I say. Most concepts that you learn seem very easy once you understand them. And sometimes that makes it hard to emphasize with learners who are struggling. I have a friend who used to say, all the math she knows is arithmetic. And she was at the time working on numerical integration of partial differential equations. I mean, it was really powerful stuff, but if she knew it, it seemed to her like it was arithmetic, and that's how she would describe it. And I get that. All Java developers had to learn object-oriented programming as part of their learning path. And once you know it, it seems easy and obvious. But try teaching beginners object-oriented programming. I think Intro Java is one of the hardest training courses to teach because some people can't make that leap in the time frame of the course. They need more time, they need more effort. It's a jump, and we forget once you've already made it. So whose fault, and I too get tired of answering the same questions over and over and again. I do teach a lot of the same classes over and over again, and while I like that, and I like the added depth that comes from thinking about these things over and over again, and the students are always different, so you never know what you're going to get, I do get a lot of the same questions over and over again. And I have to remember that if I'm getting frustrated with them, whose fault is that? I mean, okay, sometimes, yeah, students don't put in the work and they're looking for shortcuts, but I do that too. I mean, everybody does that. I'd much rather it be easy than hard. I don't deliberately want things to be hard. I mean, that would be great, but I'm not that enlightened, I'm afraid. A lot of conference speakers, I've noticed, become curmudgeons over time. Part of it is frustration with people not listening to them, partly because it's popular with the audience. A curmudgeon speaker in front of an audience will make fun of companies and stupid decisions they're making and all kinds of weird rules, and they'll use terms like cargo cult programming, which I link to, but I don't want to get into now, that kind of drip with contempt for how foolishly things are done. And there's a certain group of attendees who will feel very validated by that. They will really enjoy it. Who doesn't want to hear an expert tell you that your issues aren't your fault and it's the stupid programmers and the stupid companies that are to blame for your suffering? I always kind of sit and squirm in these talks. I mean, yes, dumb things are done by companies and people every day, but sometimes there's reasons, and just because you can't see why these things were done that way doesn't mean there wasn't a good reason at the time. Most people do things because it helped them solve a problem, and you may not be aware of all the constraints they were under at the time. So for me, the problem with that answer is the general hostility and contempt for others, combined with what feels like a complete lack of empathy. Now, again, I'm exaggerating a bit. Maybe it didn't come across that badly to you, but it felt bad to me. Like most hostile attitudes, being a curmudgeon can get you a short-term boost. I mean, people will cheer, at your trashing the thing they don't like. But being angry and miserable all the time is a hard way to live. The world's tough enough without looking for problems and misery and living in that misery. And that's all I'm going to say about our current political situation. But searching for someone to blame also avoids dealing with the problems at hand. Just finding someone to blame instead of actually dealing with it. That doesn't turn out to be productive either. Learning is not the fun process that teachers sometimes think it is. I mean, they already know the stuff, so it's not threatening, it's not scary to them. But for learners, learning new things can be hard and scary because you don't know what you're doing and can make you feel both uncertain and sometimes downright foolish. There's no reason for a teacher to make it harder, in my opinion. If you know that nobody ever makes the first jump, then maybe don't require them to do it without a little better preparation. And at the very least, tell them that nobody ever makes the first jump so that they can set their expectations appropriately. They may still want to give it a try, what the heck? But at least it's not humiliating after that. Okay, let me move to the next section. Why use Mockito? Now, I published a new video this week, along with another Medium post. The video is called Why Use Mockito at All, and it is available on my YouTube channel, the one you're listening to now. I don't want it to play right now, but there it is. Seems to be doing reasonably well. I managed to cut the length down to only 9 minutes, and it talks about where Mockito fits into the overall testing story. So it's the first purely technical video I put on the Tales from the Jar Side YouTube channel, and I think it's done okay. I plan for it to be the first in a series. Incidentally, I should mention also, I tried again to publish an unboxing video at Amazon with the prices masked out in case that was the problem, and no references beyond the table of contents, and again they rejected for the same reason, not complying with our community guidelines. I said, oh well, so much for that, I officially give up on them. I heard from my editor this morning, though, that I may be able to publish the video on my Author Central page, and I uploaded that and that worked. So okay, maybe I'll deal with that in next week's newsletter. Next section, tweets and toots. Elon again. I love this little tweet by the J.R.R. Jokin instead of Tolkien Twitter feed. Elon saying, "Good night, Twitter. Good work. Sleep well. I'll most likely kill you in the morning." The direct parody of the quote from Princess Bride from the Dread Pirate Roberts talking to Westley. Okay, first thing that happened last week with Twitter is Twitter had an outage, and it looked to be for a really funny reason. It was down for a few hours. Everyone kept trying to post, kept getting an error saying they were exceeding some posting limit, which was absurd. I mean, for many people, it was their first post. Rumor had it, and this was the funny part, that this was because when Twitter cut off the public API that was used by all the third-party clients, they didn't realize that some of their own systems were using that same API. And that would have been a riot, but that turned out not to be it. There's an excellent newsletter by Casey Newton. I said her, and I think it may be a him. At any rate, this is the newsletter. It's called Platformer. And Casey Newton and Zoe Schiffer. Casey Newton's the founder and editor of Platformer, a publication about the intersection of tech and democracy. I'm sorry, obviously it's a him. I'm sorry about that. But at any rate, a very good newsletter this week. And the quote that he added was, it turned out that an employee had inadvertently deleted data for an internal service that sets the rate limits using Twitter. for using Twitter. The team that worked on that service left the company in November. So it is self-inflicted wound. I mean, of course it is. But it wasn't the funny variation I thought. In this, oops. In the same newsletter, Newton also reported that Musk is the reason that Twitters now have viewer counts on them. And he was upset that his own personal viewer counts have been dropping recently. So he called in one of the head developers and grilled him about it. And the quote says in the newsletter, one of the company's 2 remaining principal engineers offered a possible explanation for Musk's declining reach. Just under a year after the Tesla CEO made a surprise offer to buy Twitter, public interest in his antics is waning. Employees showed Musk internal data regarding engagement with his account, and then this Google Trends chart, which looks like this. You can see there's interest in Musk peaking back way up here at whatever 100 means. And yet now it's much, much lower, 8, 9, really low numbers. It really changed on the Google Trends chart. And Musk, so in other words, Musk was, last April, they told him Musk was at a peak popularity in search rankings indicated by a score of 100. Today's at a score of 9. Engineers had previously investigated whether Musk's reach had somehow been artificially restricted, but found no evidence that the algorithm was biased against him. And Musk did not take the news well. You're fired, Musk told the engineer. He didn't want to hear that and fired him. Incredible. Changed someone's life based on that. What an oversensitive man baby. Now see that, I don't mind saying, that's punching up, right? And besides, again, if Musk gets offended by me, that's probably the best thing that could ever happen to this newsletter and the Twitter channel and the YouTube channel, probably skyrocket. Although I imagine it would be miserable for a while. Also, can you believe it's been a whole year since Musk made that original offer? Boy, the time went fast. All that and more led to this wonderful meme, which I saw from a couple different sources, so I don't know the original one. It's definitely Star Trek related. On the left, you see Zephram Cochrane, inventor of the warp drive, supposedly. It says, how I thought about Elon in 2010. And in the middle, we have Quark from Deep Space Nine, the ultimate capitalist exploiter. It says, how I thought about Elon in 2016. And on the right is one of the Pack-Leds. How I thought about Elon in 2022. The Pack-Leds were a race in Next Generation who've been in others since then, who are basically idiots who collect things, or more to the point, stupid con artists in way over their heads. And yeah, that's my opinion of Elon has gone through pretty much exactly that same path over the past few years. Although I think it was compressed a bit more. Okay, moving to another joke. Let's get away from all the annoying stuff. Somebody, 2 different people posted this meme as well, which I've always enjoyed. I've used this in presentations myself. This is the greatest Venn diagram I've ever seen. On the left, you have a beaver with a guitar. On the right, you have a duck with a keyboard. And in the overlap, you have a platypus with a keytar, because of course you do. Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that one. This post I saw on Mastodon was a great commentary on these AI tools and how they're changing the world. So a person named Tom Walker said, after teaching the first parrot to talk, my God, imagine the possibilities. All talking-based work will surely now be replaced by the parrot. From the telephone operator to the talk show host, all their jobs can be done far cheaper by this miraculous bird. That's it in a nutshell. ChatGPT is a trained parrot. It's just making pattern matching decisions based on what it's already seen. And so are the rest of these AI tools. Don't expect much more than that. There's no underlying understanding or anything like that, at least for a while, maybe a long while. As an aside, I am stuck working on some proposals for some upcoming video courses, and I hate writing proposals. So I got inspired and opened up ChatGPT and tried to get it to write the proposal for me. And it gave me something, but it wasn't what I needed. It wasn't quite right. And I think I just didn't craft the prompts correctly. That whole field of prompt crafting for AIs is going to be a significant skill in the future. Although, again, I expect the tools to get better, and we'll see how that works out. And finally, this great definition of sampling bias from apparently something called sketch planations, whatever that is. It says, Sampling bias, the chart says, yes, I love responding to surveys, and no, I toss them in the bin. And of course, 99.8% are yes, and only 0.2% are no. And the caption says, we received 500 responses and found that people love responding to surveys. And wow, an absolutely perfect definition of sample bias. The only surveys they got back were the people who love responding to them. Although no, 0.2% throw them in the bin and yet sent in the survey, apparently. So go figure. But I love that one. That was really great. I have to find somewhere to use that other than the newsletter. Have a great week, everybody. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Hope you did enjoy it. Referees, despite the refereeing. It's much easier to watch when you don't have a favorite, and I didn't have a great preference. I didn't have a strong preference for either team. I hate that tomahawk chop. I think it's both racist and contemptible and has no place in the world now. But nobody cares what I think about that. I just choose also not to blame the players for it. I mean, I know Patrick Mahomes has spoken out against these things, but we'll see. Last week, I taught the Managing Your Manager course on the O'Reilly Learning Platform, and latest features in Java is an NFJS virtual workshop, and week 2 of 3 of my Android development bootcamp on the O'Reilly Learning Platform. This week I have the week 3 of 3 on that Android development bootcamp, but otherwise it's a relatively quiet week. Thank you very much for listening. Please consider, if this is valuable to you, liking or subscribing to the video would be great. Feel free to share with others. And of course, you can always contact me if you like by any of the regular channels, and I'll try to get back to you. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you again next week. Take care.